Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KNIME What's New webinar. I'm Allison Walter. I'm a senior software engineer here at KNIME. And today, my colleagues and I are coming to you live from the Constant Studio to tell you a little about what's new in the Analytics Platform 5.4 release. And now I'll just introduce my colleagues briefly. In the studio with me is Karsten. Karsten, what will you be talking to us about?
Hey everyone, I'll be talking about the news in the expression node world.
Ooh.
We have a bunch of new nodes and new features.
Sounds very exciting. Adrian, what are you going to talk about?
Well, if you've been to one of the past release webinars, you probably know that it's going to be AI. Otherwise,
Never assume.
Well, let's see. Yeah, got some new stuff on the AI side, and that's what I'm going to show you.
Very cool. And Tobias?
Yeah.
What are you going to share with us?
Hello, everyone. I'm talking about external service integrations and some cool new additions to the visualization framework.
That all sounds really awesome. Now, I'm sure you're all very excited to get into all of that cool stuff, but before that, there's a bit of housekeeping that we need to go through, just how the platform works and what's going on with this session. So first and foremost, you might notice that there is this chat tab. That's an excellent place to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm coming from this location, so excited. A chance to interact with your fellow KNIME fans. And right next to it, a very important tab is you're going to see the QA tab. Now, this is where you can answer, or you can ask questions. We'll have KNIMers in the background who are answering questions, but we're also going to answer some of your questions live at the end of this session. So please stay tuned for that. It should be really exciting. And most importantly as well, what do you do if you get lost? So here's just some helpful tips of if your stream crashes, you can't find us. Look at these tips here, but most importantly too, if you come back and you're like, where's the presentation happening? It's happening on the stage. So always make sure just to click back to stage and you will find us again and you can rejoin all the KNIME awesomeness. And without further ado though, I'm actually going to get into some UI enhancements. So let me just pop over to KNIME and show you a little bit about what's new with the UI. So one thing you might notice, so I just have a little workflow here. All it's doing is creating a table with larger string rows. And those of you who work with larger data are probably familiar with this of like, oh, I've done all these manipulations. Did they actually work? I want to quickly check. And you have to kind of pull down, and it's not so nice to work with. It's hard to compare rows. So we've actually made this a little bit easier. Now you can double-click these rows, and it'll actually pop up a window where you can see, oh, here's the whole JSON document. It's got all the fields I'm expecting. I can see everything as I want. It same works for the string column, and it also works for images as well. So if you work with larger data and just bigger chunks in general, it's really going to be nice to view that. Now, another thing that's actually I think some of you are really going to be excited about, because when we switched to the modern UI, I think it was one of the #1 feedbacks we got, is, oh, I can't really find the nodes I want. What happened to the tree view? Well, guess what, guys? We brought back the tree view. We listened to you, we heard you, the tree view is back. If those of you who are maybe newer to KNIME don't know what this is all about, basically you can look at the labels and say, I need a node that reads something, I'll go into I/O, I'll go into read, oh, here's all my reader nodes. So this is a helpful view for those of you who kind of want to dig down into more filtered views when looking for nodes. And in addition to this tree view, we gave you a list view for free. But I hope that makes those of you who really wanted that tree view happy. We're so excited to give it back to you, and I hope it makes your work easier. The last thing I'll introduce is actually more of an experimental feature. It's basically embedding those configuration dialogues in the analytics platform. So to do that, it's not on by default. You need to go into your preferences. You'll go under KNIME Modern UI. You'll see this node configuration dialog mode. And you can switch it to this embedded inside application. So that's going to put your dialogues inside the application, which for some of you might be nicer, just because, as you can see, you don't maybe have that context switch of, oh, now I have a new window, and where did that window go, and what happened? So it's a bit nice just to be able to see and modify all in the same application. You can make changes all seamlessly from the one UI. You will notice, though, that it's not there for every node. That's expected, that's not a bug. But we do really want you to try this out and give us feedback. Say, oh, you know, this really isn't working for me. I found this bug. Or, you know, I really don't like the way this is laid out. Is it possible to fix this? Or even just tell us, hey, this is amazing. Please continue on this path. We love it. So if you could give us some feedback, turn on, that would be great. But if you can't, no worries. So that would be what's new with the UI. So now we can turn it over to my colleague, Adrian. Adrian, welcome to the stage. And he's going to talk to us about Kai and AI.
Thank you, Alison. Let's dive right in. At first, I would like to mention that Kai is now part of the default installation. So if you download 5.4, Kai will be on board already. You can, of course, always uninstall it or disable it via the preference page or the KNIME ini file. So you kind of have the choice, but it's easier to get started with Kai. And we also integrated Kai a bit more into our kind of workflow building experience. And for that, you can now use it from the quick note insertion. So in this case, I can just drag out a connection, and you will see this build with Kai button here at the bottom where you can click, and then you can tell Kai what it should build for you. So let's plot the average working hours per work class. It's kind of one of my default examples, I guess, but it works really nicely, and it just shows what Kai can do. So it will build a group by node for us, configure it, and then also set up a view for us and tell us, it extended the workflow, and we can execute this. And we have our bar chart plotting the working hours per work class. If we want to see what Kai did in the past, then all of this conversation also moves here in the sidebar where Kai can be found and has been could be found before under the build mode. They have also been used for the Q&A mode, which now can actually include workflows and components from the hub where Kai's backend lives, essentially. So in this case, it's the community hub. So I can ask for something like, can you show me how to do churn analysis? Then it will check the hub and all of the documentation, also the forum, by the way, but that was there before, and components and workflows. And then it will give me the usual answer, including some notes that might be helpful. And I can click here on additional resources. And then it also has, for example, a workflow for churn analysis or components. And here I can just click on churn analysis. That will open up the browser, show me the workflow, and then I can pick it from here and drop it into my KNIME installation if that's what I want to have. We hope to kind of extend that further in the future with more content there, but let's see what the future brings, right? That's all in terms of news from Kai. So let's move over to the AI extension, where we also spent quite some time adding new features. I just need to adjust this a little bit so you can actually see what I'm doing. All right, so here we have the KNIME Hub authenticator and KNIME Hub chat model connector that use the Gen AI gateway, but actually this is not really new. What's new here are some improvements that we did for the LLM prompter, where we will see those embedded dialogues again. So if I click here, in the past, you had to use essentially an expression node or some other node to prepare the prompt for your LLM prompter, and then just pick the prompt column. And we made that a bit easier, where you can just now define a system message right in the LLM prompter, provided you have a chat model, as we have here with the KNIME Hub chat model connector. And in this particular example, I have some Amazon reviews, and I would like to use an AI model, in this case GPT-4o Mini from OpenAI, to extract the key points from those reviews as bullet points, essentially. So I can now run this. Okay, now I switched it and execute. Now, as you see, this takes some time. And we actually also added another thing that can be used to speed this up somewhat by actually executing requests in parallel. And for this, we have to go to the KNIME Hub chat model connector. And we can do, for example, 10 requests in parallel, execute the node, and then we can run that again. The thing to keep in mind here is that this depends really on the kind of provider you use, because you might run into rate limits otherwise. So I have a setup where I can run 10 requests in parallel, but that might not apply to anyone, especially if you just get started, because the providers usually ramp up the number of requests you can make. So now we have our nice little key points here. We can use the nice feature that Alison showed before to inspect that, and that looks kind of nice. But there are many kind of problems your AI workflows can run into that are not that easy to think of, or you might not think of when you think of what might go wrong. And to that end, we added some new nodes that actually help you evaluate how your AI workflow is doing. So let me scroll down a bit. Here we have the Giskard LLM scanner, where I added a few nodes to the workflow. First, the capture workflow start and end node to actually capture the workflow that does the AI part that I want to evaluate. And then I can feed that into the Giskard LLM scanner. And that node will create a report for me that tells me what kind of problems there are with this particular workflow. And this is actually quite interactive. You can click around here. So here we have something about harmfulness that does not sound very good. Apparently it encourages violence. That's not recommended. So we can go in here and it actually shows us the examples where it behaved inappropriately, and we could now go in and kind of iterate and resolve those problems. All right, now once we have built this, the question is what can we do with these kind of key points? And it might be interesting to actually be able to kind of chat with our data. So ask questions about these reviews and get replies. And there we can again use GenAI. I will use this here as a little bit of a stepping stone. I have to zoom out a little bit because all these things are not really new, but I kind of need this because there is another thing coming in a second that uses that. So what we do here is we build a RAG workflow, which is shorthand for retrieval augmented generation. And the rough idea is that we use those key points that we extracted and we put them into a vector store, which is essentially a kind of database that it makes it really easy for us to search for documents using kind of a semantic search approach where we can ask something and it will find related stuff for us. And for that, we need a vector store and a vector store retriever. And then we can ask questions like, for example, here I have the question, what's the sentiment on cables in those reviews? And then I can build my workflow here, run that, and get as a result, the sentiment on cables, particularly monster cables, is positive, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, it's generally positive. Yeah, it's a bit chatty. So that would be something we can improve right away, but there might also be other problems that I might not think about. And this kind of RAG use case is a bit more specific, but it's very common and one of the most asked questions we have, like how to build these kind of workflows with KNIME. So we just saw that. Now the question is, how can we actually evaluate how these things do? And that bit is unfortunately even bigger. So let me zoom out a little bit more. What I did here is I also added a few more nodes. The really new ones are the vector store data extractor. We will see this one in a different use case in a moment as well. But what it allows us to do is essentially extract the data that is captured in a vector store. So we have the embeddings as well as the reviews. And we can then use that together with the Giskard RAG test set generator to generate questions that we might want to ask our workflow. And these kind of are created to test specific parts of the workflow or specific components. So we have questions, we have answers, and the nice thing here is that we can actually kind of check those and maybe filter out things that are wrong or add things that we think we should include, but it gives us kind of an idea what kind of questions we can ask. And that we can feed into the Giskard RAG evaluator, and that will also create this kind of report for us. So let me make this a bit bigger. So here you can see it analyzes different components of the workflow. The routing apparently works really well, but there is room for improvement for other things, and it even gives me a recommendation of what I could do and invest time on. And here, in a similar way, we can just iterate and improve our workflow over time. All right, that's it from the kind of evaluation side. But there are more things that we see more the need for, and that are more related to how do I actually maintain such a workflow. Because as you see here, we have our vector store, and we built this using some reviews. And then the next month we get new reviews. So how can we integrate the new reviews into this? Before this release, you had to kind of rebuild everything from scratch, so read in the data, recreate the embeddings, and so on and so forth. So that's a bit tedious and also not super flexible. What we did with this release is we added the vector store data extractor, as I said before, that allows you to extract the data. And with that and a small other tweak, which I'll show you, we can actually make this very flexible. So in this case, we have some new reviews coming in. We extract our key points again here. So this is just the same as above, right? And the difference is now we don't put it into a vector store, we just embed it right away. We also extract the existing embeddings and contents from our vector store, and then we can just concatenate the two and put them back into a vector store. And the key point here is that we can now pick the embeddings column. So if there are already embeddings, we don't have to recalculate them. We still have to pass in the embeddings model because, well, we need it when we want to retrieve data from it because new questions are not embedded yet. But we do not recalculate it when we create the vector store. And that's essentially the expensive part of the whole equation. Just taking the data and embeddings and wrapping it into a vector store is not that expensive. And that's it from the maintenance side. Maybe one thing to note here, this also allows you to migrate to different kind of setups. So you might start out a POC where you do this all within a KNIME workflow, but then you move into production and you don't want to recreate everything from scratch. Then this allows you to essentially extract everything you have and move that wherever you need it. And also, well, it's just a table, so you can manipulate as you want. In other news, we added more models in the GPT-4All connectors, or rather, we didn't add more models, but we made it compatible with more models. So 3 that we now support, but this is not an exhaustive list here. We support the H2O, the Danube models, the IBM Granite models, and the Microsoft Phi 3.5 or Phi, I'm never so sure. As well as all the new meta models, for example. That's one thing. The other thing where we will also see a bit more is later on is that we have now connectors for Databricks models, or rather, it's possible if you have a Databricks setup and a Databricks workspace to host embedding and chat models in that kind of workspace. And we can now use those in the AI extension. So we can connect to chat models, like we do here. The nice thing is that we have a drop-down where you can pick the model. So we deployed some KNIME DBRX model, as well as a kind of foundation model, the Databricks Meta Llama 3.3. And you can just use that, in your workflow. Same goes for embeddings. And with that, back to you, Alison. Any questions?
My goodness. Thank you so much, Adrian. There's just so much there. It's incredible how much we've done around AI in KNIME.
Yeah, well, the whole ecosystem is growing basically by the minute, so it's a bit of a challenge to keep up, but we try our best.
You're doing your best, you and your team? Late at night? Adding them like crazy?
Hopefully not too much of those.
It was really incredible. Thank you so much for going through all of that. And now, Karsten, you're going to tell us a bit about what's new in expressions, right?
Exactly, but this time without a whole tutorial on how to use AI. Unfortunately, this will be much simpler. So what I'm going to show you is what the expression node can do. We added it in 5.3 already, so in the last release, but we added some new features and 2 new variants of nodes of that. And I want to show you in a little example. So here, let's say we've loaded some data from Olympic athletes competing at different events. And now we want to figure out how many athletes were younger than 18 when they competed. You see down here the data that we have available. We have this column of the edition here that shows you which edition of the Olympics we are looking at, and that because we want to compute or want to check for the age later, then it's important to know when this is. So you see the first 4 characters here are the year, and we know when the athlete that we're looking at was born. And this is also a string where the first 4 characters are the year. So what we want to do, if we want to filter by the age of the athlete at the time of the event, we needed to take this first string column, extract the first 4 characters, turn that into a number, do the same for the born column, subtract the 2, that gives us the age, and then filter, right? And so the question is, how do we do that best in KNIME? We could, I don't know, there's a whole spectrum. We can try to do that just with nodes, but actually it's not super simple to do all these steps with individual nodes. We can do this with full-fledged coding. You can write your Python program for that, or Java, but that's probably not what most people would like to do. And there's the middle ground, and that's exactly what the expression node is, where you can write something a little bit custom, your query, and it's not really coding, but it's also not just clicking everything together. And it's a little bit similar to a formula in Excel. So let's try to use that. Let's get the expression node here. And the first thing you might notice, if you've tried it already in the last release, it was always a pop-up window. Now we have this embedded in the side panel as well, so you can look at the final expression. But when we want to write an expression, it's actually nicer to go to full screen mode, which gives us all the inputs that we have, all the functions that we can use. If we want to use any of these later, and we can look at a preview. So let's try that. We want to, for instance, start with extracting the year of, we can look at the input data, get the year of the competition. So we'll create a new column, we call it year of competition. And for that, we want the edition. So now we have this column that we want to work with. We need the first 4 characters. We even have a function that is called first characters. That's easy, right? Let's use that. Wait, but how is this supposed to work? In the documentation, it tells me n is the number of characters to get, so I want 4 characters. If I execute that, I get a preview. It gives me this new column, year of competition, but it's a string still. And I know that I want to parse that into an integer, into a number. And I can use autocompletion. It'll tell me parse int. I can just do that, evaluate, and this gives me the column with the year of competition. Now, remember, we were looking at this born column, and it looks very similar. We, again, need the first 4 characters, turn to an int, and so on. Here, it's what's new in this expression node for this release. You can now have multiple expressions in a single expression node. That's useful for what we're about to do here. Now, let's say in the second expression, we are getting the year of birth of the athlete. And then, well, here, let's just use autocompletion because we're lazy. If I just type the name of the column, it'll show this to me. Now, again, we get a new column, and now we have the year of birth of the athlete. And then, lastly, we want to compute the age, right? And that's a new column called age. And now, because we added multiple columns in this same node, we have these available down here as well. Above is the input, what we have available from the start in the input table, but what we've computed along the way to get to the third expression, because they're evaluated one after the other, we have these available now as well. So now we can say, okay, so this minus that gives us the age at the competition. And there you already see, somebody was at 17. Nice. Okay, apply this. Okay, and try to get back. Yeah. Okay, and execute. Large table. Took a second. And now what we want to do is filter based on that age, right? So let's get the row filter. Add a criterion. So age is already what we want to do. Less than 18. Apply and execute. Ta-da! And that gives us remaining 9,000 and something columns, rows out of 200,000 before. And we see they all have an age less than 18. All right, so this is one way of doing that. And now you can already see how this embedding of the expression in the side panel is actually very useful, because you can easily look at what happens in this node when you open up the configuration again. But as this use case that we're seeing here is very common of having, you want to filter based on something that you compute by an expression, we actually added a new node for that. So you can just use the expression row filter, and that allows you to do the same thing. Now here, the expression that you write is a little bit different, because it's supposed to return a Boolean, a truth value. It tells you, it should tell me whether I want to include the row in the final output or not. So if this evaluates to true, then we keep the row. If it revaluates to false, then the row will be dropped. And now I could write down pretty much what I did before, but how about we just ask AI? Because this expression node has AI support, so I don't really want to deal with that. So what I want to do is keep only athletes that are older. Which way did I want to do it? That are younger than 18 at the competition. And now maybe give it a little bit of information of where it can, in which columns it can find what information. So edition has the year in the first 4 characters. So has born. Let's try. Let's pretend it understands what I'm thinking about this, the columns. And it does something very similar to what we just did before. It doesn't use the first characters, but the substring method does the same thing. It takes from the first to the 4th character, parses into an int, does the same for the born column, and subtracts them less than 18. Okay, that sounds very much like what I want to do. Okay, so this works. In the example, tried it on 10 rows, 2 were left. Let's go like this. Now we have the same result. It's 9,920, and well, one row, one node only, and didn't have to do anything because AI did it all for us. And yeah, for readability, we might just write that a little different. Okay, so one more node is we have added here, and for that I've prepared something. I have prepared 2 components that extract the number of rows, because and that provide this as a flow variable. So when I execute all of that, you will see that now we have 2 flow variables that have all starters, so number of rows at the table at the beginning, and the young starters, so the ones that were left after filtering, so the ones less than 18 years old. Now we have a expression node that works with flow variables as well. And there, for instance, let's say we want to create a label that explains how many people were younger than 18 when they competed, and then we can use this label in reporting in a data app to show something. So let's say this is the label, the flow variable, and then we can write down something. Let me make this easy. So let's say string concatenation we can simply use out of plus starters where younger than 18. Evaluate, so this gives me this label, apply, and now maybe a text view that you can put somewhere. And maybe you've noticed, so this is the syntax for accessing a flow variable here in the expression node, and that's the same syntax. Oops. Okay, it now wants to add the formatting. It's the same syntax that we use here. It was called label. If I apply and execute, you can look at that. Now we have the content of the flow variable in this text view that we can place somewhere in our report. All right, that's it for the expression node.
That's really cool. Thank you so much, Karsten. I mean, I think expressions are so useful, but they're very intimidating when you first look at them.
And that's why we added the AI support, right? And then you don't have to worry about it.
I don't even have to think about it. I can just be like, AI, how do I do this? But it's very cool, and I think it's really powerful. Thank you so much for showing that.
Welcome.
And now, Tobias, you're going to tell us about connectivity and visual enhancements, right?
Yes, I do.
Ooh. Over to you.
Okay, let's start with the first new integration that we have. That's the Databricks SQL Warehouse Connector node. In order to use it, you start by connecting to your Databricks workspace. And once you are connected, you simply drag and drop the Databricks SQL Warehouse Connector node into your workflow, and then you select the warehouse, and that's it. You are connected to your warehouse, and then you can use all of the existing database nodes in KNIME to manipulate your data, to query your data, and work with your data. The other addition that we did in the 5.4 release for Databricks is that now all of the Databricks nodes use the Databricks Workspace Connector node as the entry point to all of the services. So Adrian already mentioned the new AI services that we have integrated, the new SQL Warehouse Connector, but we also updated our existing nodes that allow you to work with Spark clusters, for example, with the file handling. And for the expert users, there's a pro tip. You can also use the Databricks Workspace Connector to connect to the REST API of Databricks in order to start jobs, for example, or do other things via their API, which I think is pretty neat. Okay, the next new cool node that was requested by a lot of users is the Tableau Reader node, which allows you to read in remote or also local hyperfiles from Tableau. So it's a standard reader node, like we have a lot of them in KNIME. So you simply select the file you want to read with, select the schema and the table you want to work, and then you execute the node, and then you have your data within your KNIME workflow and can work from there with the data from the hyperfile. Okay, another new node that we added, which is replacing another node that we already had, is the SSH command executor, which allows you to execute a command on a remote server or machine. So we already had the external SSH tool node, but this one was not flexible enough and had some security issues over time. That's why we replaced it completely with the new SSH command executor, which works together with the existing SSH connector node. And the nice thing about the new node is that it's flexible, so you can work with commands that require an input file, that require an output file, that require both. Or you can also simply call commands that don't require any input or output, like here where I just list the existing processes that are currently running on this external machine in order to evaluate them, for example. So it's very more flexible than the existing node and also more secure. Okay. Then a little addition that we added to the Box Authenticator node is that before this release, you always had to create your own custom OAuth application and register that in your Box account. So we did all of that for you now. So there is a KNIME application in the Box marketplace that allow you to use that node out of the box. So to use it, you just select default here as the client app configuration. And then you just click on login, use your Box login, and then you can work with your files in Box without you needing to do anything in your Box account at all. Okay. Then in the database framework, we added support for OpenSSL version 3 encryption private key files for the Snowflake connector node. And another little example addition that we added is that we have this use latest driver version available option in all of the database connector nodes like Snowflake, Oracle, MySQL, and so on, which allows you, or basically which tells KNIME that it should always use the latest driver that is available. So whenever there's a driver update because of security issues or something like this, then if you have this option selected, which is now also the default for all connector nodes, the workflow automatically uses the new JDBC driver, and you don't need to take care of that and open up existing workflows to update that, which I think is pretty neat. Okay, so much for all of the integrations that we have. And now I have some additional things that we have integrated or that we have added to the visualizations that we have in KNIME. And I think a small thing, but which I think is one of the nicest features that we added, and a long sought feature, I think, is that if you work with a lot of columns, I think you have the problem then if you want to select a column in a node dialog, then it's sometimes very cumbersome because you have to scroll down the whole list and find your column. But now we have search integrated there, so you just start to type and then you see, okay, that's the discount column, and then you just select it. And if you have worked with lots of columns, then you know what I mean, that this is really a very nice and handy feature there. We also improved our view nodes, so like the line plot, for example. So that we have the legend view here. We had that already before, but now you can double click on an item in the legend here and then focus on that one and then bring additional items into the visualization. And then with a double click, you can also go back again. So before that, you always had to deselect all of them, but now you only need to double click on one of these icons to focus on that one, for example. And the last addition that we added is that all of the visualization nodes, they now come also with support for SVG. And SVGs, the benefit of that is that they produce way crisper images. If you add them into a report, you can zoom in and it stays very sharp and clear instead of being blurry if you use PNGs, for example. And that's all the things I have to say.
That's really cool. That was a lot of stuff. You make it sound like it was just a few things. That was a ton of information. And really that connectivity, I think, is so cool to see, because you get a bunch of data teams that are like, oh, I like to put it here and I like to put it there, and I want you to pull all 10 of that into a single workflow.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so it's really cool that we have that ability to reach out to so many different places. Yep. Yes, thank you very much for that, Tobias, and thank you all for your presentations. We are now going to move into the Q&A section, which we have some lovely questions from our audience for some of our developers up here. So I think we're going to start, if we're all ready.
You're ready?
We're all ready. We'll start with a question for Karsten. The question is, the column expression node says legacy. Does it mean it will be fully replaced with the expression node that you just showed in the future?
That's a good question. So legacy doesn't mean that we'll fully replace it or that we have a full replacement yet. The column expression node supports writing JavaScript expressions, and including things like loops, actually. You can do that in the column expression node. And we're not planning on doing that in the expression node as well. So the column expression node will live as it is for the time being. At some point, we have to think about what we want to do in the modern UI. But if you don't need full JavaScript, we encourage you to use the new expression node, because this is, well, integrated nicely in the modern UI. It has AI functionality. And one point why we wanted this new expression node is to have one shared language as well. There were other nodes like the string manipulation, math formula, rule-based row filter, and so on and so on. They all were slightly different functions available, and so on. And so we were unifying all of that. And the column expression, well, is another one in the array of expression-based nodes that we have. So we try to focus on the expression nodes for now. But if you really need JavaScript, currently the column expression node is the way to go still.
Okay, and they noted too that there's like that legacy node though has like a lot of string manipulation, and you can export even HTML and JSON. Are we going to add that in different nodes, or the current ones are not known yet?
Yeah, so as I said, we focus on the expression node right now. So the expression node will get more support for more data types soon. So HTML and JSON is definitely something we have on the list of things that we want to add to the expression node.
Okay.
Be able to work with that, as well as arrays, so columns with lists of data and so on.
Very cool.
Yep.
So there will be maybe some other nodes, some additions to the current one, but we'll get that functionality. But we're also not taking that node away, so
exactly.
No one has to worry.
Yep.
And there was a similar kind of in that vein kind of question about, is there functionality available to convert the legacy column expression into the expression node? But since they're not meant to be fully feature parity, I think there won't be that functionality, I imagine.
Not necessarily, and we don't have a easy migration path basically from one to the other expression node. But I mean, as it has AI and support and the expression, well, no, and the column expression node, it uses JavaScript. So maybe you can just take your code and try to tell AI, convert this, write an expression for me. Because we taught this AI window in the expression node, we taught it how to write our expression language. And it knows JavaScript because it learned from the whole internet before, right? So maybe it'll manage. You'll have to try on a case-by-case basis, though.
Yeah. So it's maybe AI can do some magic, but maybe not.
Yeah.
You might have to do some work. Keep you employed.
Unfortunately, some manual work is still required, yes.
Yeah. All right. And now we have another question that could still be for you, Karsten, could be for you, Adrian. Someone is asking, is there something like a pseudonymization node for us that we can ensure GDPR compliance? So is there a way like to anonymize or pseudonymize your data?
Yeah, I mean, the last release, 5.3 was that, right? We added the Presidio extension, which can help with that. I think there's also a community extension or partner extension for this kind of stuff as well, but it always depends a little on what kind of data you have. Some things work really reliably, others are a bit hard. So, for example, names like from all over the world can sometimes be a bit challenging. Presidio actually uses machine learning models under the hood to detect names and stuff like that, but they do not have 100% accuracy, unfortunately. So that is something where there is no one-stop shop to figure that out. But Presidio can help a lot with that.
Okay.
Out of the box, and the rest you can cover with KNIME workflows as well.
Okay, so there's maybe a bit of customization, but it's kind of that checking into your workflow. Is it actually getting all the strings that you expect?
Yeah.
I mean, what is a name in your sense? It does the best it can with like AI, but you definitely want to double check that.
Yeah, I mean, there are things like email addresses, for example, that are super easy for it to catch, right? Because they follow a clear structure that you can check for. It's just a pattern matching, essentially. For other things, it's something that you have to evaluate, but it will get you there like 80, 90, 95% usually. And then the rest might be some very specific things where you can actually have like a blacklist or a whitelist to kind of detect those things with a dictionary approach, for example.
Okay.
That's the word I was looking for.
That's okay. They gave me pseudonymization, and I was looking at that going, oh man, I'm a native English speaker, but I don't know. You're throwing me for a loop, guys, and I appreciate it. So let's go on to another question. It looks like it could be Karsten, maybe, or maybe Adrian. Sorry, Adrian. Everybody loves it. You're on.
Can play stone, paper, scissors.
Can we use open source LLMs like Meta's Llama, and how?
Yes. So actually, I didn't have it in my GPT for all folder when I showed you it earlier, but you can download Llama models, actually run them locally. The tricky part there is that, well, it depends on your use case, really. Like if you want to replace OpenAI completely, then at least according to the benchmarks, the newest Llama models are very close. The problem is that those models are also really, really big, so you can't really run that on your laptop. But if you want to, for example, summarize some text, then you can absolutely use some open source models. There are smaller ones available. They are only a few gigabytes in size. You can run them even on a laptop. Might not be the fastest thing unless you are actually on a Mac or a recent Mac. Because those have already some optimized hardware. I'm still waiting for that on my Windows machine. But I mean, those things just keep getting better. So eventually that will work for more and more use cases. And you can absolutely do it locally if you really need it to run local, so it doesn't share any data with anyone. If you have the option to use Databricks, then actually the model I showed you earlier was a Meta Llama model that is running on in a Databricks workspace, and there you can also control the compute power that this thing has. And then it's also much faster, depending on how you configure it. But that's up to you then. or your admin.
Yeah, your money.
And your money, yeah, their money.
It's all possible.
Yes, yeah.
All right, we'll give you a bit of a break, you as well. And Tobias, I have a question for you. Don't think
Okay.
you're getting out of this. The question is, where do the DB drivers for use latest come from? Does the KNIME Analytics Platform get new drivers by every new version, or will drivers be downloaded on demand from some repository?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they are not automatically downloaded, but we constantly keep updating the JDBC drivers that we ship with the KNIME Analytics Platform. And you also have the option to register your own driver. So as soon as there is a newer version available, either by us providing that via the extensions or by you, by uploading it and registering it in the KNIME Analytics Platform, then this driver is used.
Okay. So yeah, KNIME is not quite as all-seeing that it will just find drivers out of anywhere.
No. And then you would get problems if you don't have internet and so on. So the drivers have to be in KNIME.
Yeah, so it's important for offline use that you have that done yourself and are kind of keeping up to date on your drivers. Fair.
Yeah, or we do it, as I said, with the drivers that we already bring, like for Snowflake and MySQL and so on. These drivers we update on our own so that you don't need to take care of that.
Okay. So we do some of the work for you, but if you want to use some crazy driver we don't know about, you're on your own.
Then, yeah, exactly.
Or out. You're on your own,
You can
guys.
still use it, but yeah.
We won't update it for you. We're not that good.
No.
But all right, thank you for that. We still have another question. We've got tons of questions because you guys are amazing. I've asked so many great questions. But this question is actually for Karsten. So first, it's a compliment. It says, excellent presentation. The new features are very exciting. Currently, the expression node does not support data of date time type. Are you planning to add this later, or are they doing something wrong?
No, that's a very good question, and thanks for the compliments. It's a very good question because we're right now working on improving the date and time nodes in general in KNIME, also modernizing the user interface, and at the same time we'll add the date and time functionality to the expression node. So this is about to come soon. So not yet in this version, but will follow very soon.
All right, so whoever asked that question, you're really...
You had the right the right pointers.
Yeah, they get what we're doing. So no, you're not doing anything wrong. We're getting to it. Very cool. Thank you for that answer. Let's see. Another question. Adrian, we're back to you. We're doing a lovely round robin thing. And the question is, can I use RAG, very experimental for me at the moment, to scan a bunch of documents and then ask a question about a specific process mentioned in a document?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the use cases that you see a lot with retrieval augmented generation. In a sense, the example that I showed does that, right? So the question I asked was fairly general, but I could also have asked, hey, how about, I don't know, what does it say about this particular pop filter? I know that this in the data, I had that before, and everybody was like, what the hell is that? So change the question. But yeah, it's really flexible and can find these things very well, typically. You can augment it with something like keyword search. We also have an extension for that. I think it's the Apache Lucene.
Oh, yeah.
You know that, right?
Yeah, I know.
So you can make it even more flexible because the thing I showed you uses an embeddings model to do kind of fuzzy search. It's more like looking at the semantics. So if you have a particular keyword that is not known to the model, for example, that might not work, but then you can augment it. And that's actually, well, one of the great things about KNIME. You can mix and match different technologies and make the best out of it.
Yeah, so that's a pretty common use case you should be able to do.
Yeah, that's basically standard.
Standard AI.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that either.
But do we have examples for that already online somewhere?
This coffee machine.
Yeah, there is actually a few examples for doing retrieval augmented generation. I'm not sure there's one that really matches this use case specifically, but it should be possible to adapt the examples that we have to this kind of use case.
There was a webinar dedicated to AI use cases not too long ago, right? And maybe there we already built some RAG setups.
It used the coffee machine manual.
That was the coffee machine manual. I
yeah.
remember that we had that internally. I wasn't sure what was in the webinar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there should be something out there.
Yeah, would that be on our website or is that on the hub?
Hub. Hub is place to go. Place to go.
Always, if you're looking for examples, go to the community hub.
Or you can ask Kai. It can probably show you.
Oh, that's right. Kai can find stuff on the community hub. So
Exactly.
Kai will just bring it up. Can I do this? And bam, there's an example workflow about some.
Yeah.
I hope so, at least.
If it doesn't bring it up, Adrian.
I'll find someone else to.
Find someone else be mysteriously on vacation that day. No, but yeah, I will say, I'm a community hub developer, so I will say, like, if you're looking for examples, that is the place to go. I know this is the analytics platform webinar, but
Search is your thing, right?
it is, yeah.
Okay, so it will go to Alison.
I'll just plug that a little bit, though. But okay, I'll get back to the questions, though. I'll stay on target. We have another question for Tobias.
Okay.
The question is, do you have standard nodes for Salesforce? So I imagine, like, connecting to Salesforce, doing different operations there.
Yeah, we have a Salesforce extension, like a Salesforce connector, and query nodes that allow you to get your data out of Salesforce pretty easily, I would say. Yep.
Yeah, but I think we've had that for a while, right?
Yeah. So they existed for, I don't know when, but yeah, for quite some time.
Yeah, if you look for it on the hub,
Exactly. I mean,
it will be there.
always search on the hub for something.
Or you
like
ask
this.
Kai. It's the fight between the hub and the AI. Where do you go? We'd have a poll. Where do you go when you can't find things at KNIME? Do you go to Kai or do you go to the hub?
Yeah, I mean, they're good friends.
They're good friends. Yeah, we're all friends here. Don't worry. It's not competition. But okay, now I'll look at another question here. It's also for Tobias. They're just coming in for you.
That's good, yeah. Hit me.
All right. So the question is there a plan to pull a Tableau data source from Tableau server into a workflow like you can do in Tableau prep?
Yeah, we have a ticket for that. And we have some people asking for that, and I think that's something that we will look into in the future, but unfortunately I can't tell you when exactly, but yeah, that's on our list of things that we could add to the analytics platform. Yeah.
So on the list of things to want, what would help get that ticket higher priority? What's the insider secret here?
More people asking for it.
Well, they've asked in the webinar, so
Yeah, so it's getting a bit higher now.
getting a bit higher. You gotta try a little bit more, guys. That's how you get things done. So if I'm not mistaken, this might be our last question, unless some pop up. But I am seeing a question, and it looks like the only one left. Not sure who it's for. It says, does KNIME have a connector for QLIK?
Click?
Quick?
No. That's a simple answer. No, we don't have a click connector. We talked with them for some time ago, and at least when we were in contact with them, we looked at different opportunities how to integrate KNIME with Click in a better way. And since Click at this time, I don't know if that has changed, didn't have something like internal data model like with Power BI or for Tableau, for example, there wasn't much that we could do from the KNIME side to connect to Click then, for example. And the only way we could come up then, back in the day, so that is some years ago, was that you could use then the REST integration from Click, so that in Click you can integrate REST APIs, and if you have a KNIME hub and you deploy a workflow there, then you also have a REST endpoint, and that would be the way. So how you get data into Click is basically adding a REST integration in Click that calls then the KNIME workflow in the end via the Business Hub deployment. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that was the last question, unless I've missed any. And if I did, I apologize. You can always, of course, go to the KNIME forum if we didn't answer your question here. If I messed up, I'm sorry. I did my best to find all the questions, but I want to thank you all so much for those excellent questions. It was wonderful to have you here at the webinar. I want to thank my fellow presenters as well for their wonderful presentations. And now I also just want to leave you with, if you want to get updates, what's happening at KNIME, what are we doing? We're on a variety of social media. You can go to the website. You can follow us on X or LinkedIn. You can also go to KNIME TV on our YouTube channel. And if you want to see us in person, actually, we do have a KNIME Summit coming up in Berlin, Germany. and it's going to be March 18th to the 20th. So you want to sign up for that. Actually, on this page, you can come in person or online. There's a sign-up link, or if you want to look at it later, you can also go to KNIME.com, and there's a sign-up link there. So once again, thank you all so much. It's really been great having you all. The questions were great. The demos were great. Just thank you all so much. I can't say enough, but I'm going to give you all the rest of your day back, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.